Queen stood at the tall window of her palace and looked down at the city below. The buildings were made of white stone that glowed softly in the light of 3 moons. Her people, had built this city 10,000 years ago. They had conquered half the galaxy before most other species learned to make fire. She was old even by standards. She had lived for nearly 4,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched countless species join the galactic community, and she had learned one truth above all others: power belongs to those who live longest. They lived for thousands of years. This made them patient. This made them wise. This made them rulers. So when her youngest daughter came to her with tears in her violet eyes, begging for permission to marry a human, felt only amusement. "A human," she said, letting the word hang in the air like something unpleasant. "You want to marry a human?" Princess stood before her mother with her hands clasped together. She was barely 600 years old, still young and foolish. Her silver hair fell past her shoulders, and her pale blue skin seemed to glow with emotion. "His name is," said. "He is a diplomat from Earth. He came with the trade delegation last year. Mother, I know this seems strange, but I love him." Turned away from the window, she studied her daughter with cold eyes. Love. Such a small word for such a temporary feeling. They did not love the way other species did. They formed bonds, yes, but those bonds were practical. They served the empire. They produced strong children. They did not involve weeping at windows or begging for permission. "Tell me about this human," said. She walked to her throne and sat down slowly. "What makes him worthy of a princess?" His face brightened with hope. "He is kind, Mother. He listens when I speak. He asks questions about our culture, our history. He wants to understand us, and he makes me laugh. I did not know I could laugh so much." "He is mortal," said flatly. "He will live perhaps 80 years if he is lucky. You will watch him grow old. You will watch him die, and then you will have thousands of years to regret your choice." "I know," whispered. "I know all of this, but I would rather have 50 years with him than 5,000 years without him." Considered this. She thought about the human delegation that had visited her world. They were small creatures, these humans. Their skin came in various shades of brown and pink. They had no telepathic abilities, no natural weapons, no special powers. They lived short lives and died easily. By every measure, they were inferior to the. And yet, the humans controlled a stretch of space called the Orion Corridor. This region was rich in minerals that they needed for their ships. For decades, had considered taking this territory by force. But war was expensive, and the humans, despite their weakness, had proven surprisingly difficult to defeat in the few small conflicts that had occurred. A marriage alliance could solve this problem. "Very well," said. Looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mother, you may marry your human," waved one long hand dismissively. "He will die in a few decades. You will mourn him briefly, then return to your duties. In the meantime, this marriage will strengthen ties between our peoples." Ran forward and embraced her mother. Allowed this, though she did not return the gesture. She was already thinking about the trade agreements she would demand, the mining rights, the military access. The wedding took place 3 months later on the. Dignitaries came from across the galaxy to witness this unusual union. The great hall of the palace was filled with nobles in flowing robes of silver and gold. They towered over the small group of humans who stood near the front. Wore a simple black suit. He was not tall, even by human standards. His black hair was neatly combed and his dark eyes were calm. He did not seem nervous or afraid, even though he stood surrounded by beings who could crush him with a thought. Watched him carefully during the ceremony. She was looking for weakness, for doubt, for any sign that he understood how small he was in this place. She found nothing. Held his hand and spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice. When the ceremony ended, he kissed his new wife gently on the forehead. "He has courage," one of his advisors murmured, "for a human." "Courage is not enough," replied. Courage does not stop time. Courage does not prevent death. He is brave, yes, but bravery means nothing against eternity. She watched her daughter leave with her new husband. They would travel to a human colony world to build their life together, expected to return within a decade, bored and disappointed. Humans were interesting for a short time, like exotic pets, but their limitations would become clear soon enough. As the guests departed and the great hall emptied, allowed herself a small smile. This marriage had cost her nothing but a daughter she had never valued highly. In return, she would gain access to human space, human resources, human technology. The humans thought they had gained something too. They thought a marriage to a princess would elevate them, would make them important. They did not understand that they were being used. They were too young, too short-lived, too foolish to see the game being played around them. Returned to her throne and began reviewing the trade documents. She did not think about calm eyes or steady voice. She did not wonder why a man walking into a palace of giants had shown no fear. She should have. The human colony world was called New. It was a small planet with blue oceans and green forests, orbiting a yellow star at the edge of human territory. Compared to the ancient splendor of it was primitive. The buildings were made of simple materials. The streets were crowded with noisy vehicles. The air smelled of food and fuel and life. Princess loved it. She stood on the balcony of the small house she shared with and watched the sun set over the ocean. On her, sunsets were predictable events, carefully observed and recorded. Here, each sunset was different. The colors changed with the weather, the season, the dust in the air. Tonight, the sky burned orange and pink, and felt her heart swell with a feeling she had no word for. "You are smiling again," said, stepping onto the balcony beside her. He carried 2 cups of tea, a human drink that had grown to love. "I smile often now," she said, accepting the cup. "Is that strange?" "Not strange, just new." He stood beside her and looked at the sunset. "On my world we have a saying, a day without laughter is a day wasted." Considered this. They did not laugh much. Laughter was considered undignified, a sign of poor emotional control. But here, among the humans, laughed every day. She laughed at jokes, at the antics of children in the street, at the simple joy of being alive. She had been on New for 2 years now. In that time, she had learned more about humans than they had learned in 2 centuries of contact. She learned that they were not simple creatures at all. They were complicated, messy, passionate beings who felt everything deeply and hid nothing. Especially surprised her. He was not content to simply live beside her. He wanted to understand her, to learn from her, to grow with her. Every night he asked questions about science, history, philosophy. He took notes in a small book he carried everywhere. "Why do you write everything down?" asked him once. "Because I forget," he said simply. "Humans forget, so we write things down and then we remember forever." This struck as profound. They had perfect memories. They never forgot anything. But because they remembered everything, they rarely thought about the past. It simply existed, unchanging and eternal. Humans, because they forgot, were forced to study their past, to analyze it, to learn from it. They turned their weakness into strength. In the 5th year of their marriage, asked to teach him about agricultural technology. They had perfected farming thousands of years ago. They could grow food in any environment, on any world, in any climate. This technology was considered sacred, shared only among worlds. "Why do you want to know this?" asked. "There is a colony on the edge of human space," explained. "The soil is poor. The people are starving. If I could adapt techniques for human use, I could save them." Hesitated. Sharing technology with outsiders was forbidden. Her mother would be furious. But then she thought about the starving colonists, and she thought about kind eyes, and she made her choice. She taught him everything. What happened next amazed her. Did not simply copy the methods. He studied them, understood them, and then changed them. He made them simpler, cheaper, easier to use. Within a year, he had developed a new farming system that any human colony could adopt. Within 3 years, he had saved 4 worlds from famine. Word of his work spread. Scientists from across human space came to New to study with him, welcomed them all. He shared his knowledge freely, without asking for payment or credit. He built a small research institute where humans and scientists worked side by side. Queen received reports about this. Her spies told her about the institute, about the hybrid technologies, about the growing cooperation between the two species. She dismissed it as unimportant. "He is playing with our scraps," she told her council. "Let him feel important, it changes nothing." But it did change things. Slowly, quietly, the humans were learning. They took technology and made it their own. They asked questions they had never thought to ask. They found solutions they had never imagined. Watched her husband work late into the night, surrounded by papers and screens and eager young scientists. She saw the fire in his eyes, the passion that drove him forward, and she understood something her mother never would. They were powerful because they had lived so long. They had accumulated knowledge over thousands of years, but that same age made them slow, cautious, resistant to change. Humans were different. They lived fast, thought fast, changed fast. What that took centuries to develop, humans improved in decades. They were not content to preserve knowledge. They wanted to transform it. When sent her yearly message to her mother, she did not mention any of this. She spoke of small things, pleasant things, boring things. She knew her mother was waiting for her to fail, to tire of human limitations, to come crawling home. She would wait forever. Had found something on New that they could never offer. She had found purpose. She had found joy. She had found a partner who saw her not as a princess to be, but as a person to be loved. And she had found a truth that would one day shake the galaxy. Humans were not lesser beings to be tolerated. They were a force to be reckoned with. She just had to help them become what they were meant to be. The twins were born on a warm spring morning when the flowers of New were blooming in colors that had no names. Held them in her arms and wept, something she had never done before meeting. They were small and perfect and impossible. The boy came first. They named him, which meant precious in the old Korean language of ancestors. He had his mother's silver hair but his father's dark eyes. The girl followed minutes later. They named her Sora, which meant sky. She had her father's black hair but her mother's violet eyes. No one knew what to expect from half-human children. Such beings had never existed before. The scientists who examined them could only shake their heads in wonder. The human doctors could only smile and say they were healthy. As the children grew, their nature became clear. They were something new. Was quiet and thoughtful like his father, but he could feel the emotions of others, a gift inherited from his mother's telepathic abilities. He knew when people were sad or frightened or lying. He could not read thoughts, but he could read hearts. This made him kind in a way that surprised everyone. He sought out those who were hurting and offered comfort without being asked. Sora was loud and curious, always running, always asking questions. She had inherited her mother's long and her father's restless mind. She took things apart to see how they worked. She built strange machines from scraps and refused to explain them. By the age of 5, she had improved the efficiency of the household cleaning robot by 30%. By the age of 10, she had designed a new type of engine that used half the fuel of standard models. Watched his children with quiet pride. He did not push them to be anything. He simply gave them tools and books and freedom and let them become themselves. Watched them with something closer to fear. She knew what they represented. They were bridges between two species. They could bring peace and understanding to a galaxy divided by suspicion and pride. Or they could be seen as threats, as abominations, as weapons to be controlled. When the children were 12 years old, Queen demanded that they be sent to the. They carry royal blood, her message said. They must be educated properly. They must learn the ways of their ancestors. Send them to me, and I will make them worthy of the empire. Read this message in her garden, surrounded by flowers that had planted for her. She read it 3 times, making sure she understood every word. Then she wrote her reply. No. The single word crossed the vastness of space and landed on Queen's desk like a declaration of war. The Queen read it with cold fury. She called her advisors. She called her generals. She demanded solutions. We can send ships, one admiral suggested. The human fleet is small. We can take the children by force. And start a war, another advisor asked. The humans have grown stronger than we expected. Their fleet uses our shield technology but improved. A conflict would cost us dearly. Listen to them argue. She thought about her daughter, once so obedient, now openly defying her. She thought about the human who had somehow transformed a princess into a rebel. She thought about the children she had never met, carrying blood that was half hers, but raised in a world she did not understand. How did this happen? She asked quietly. No one could answer her. On New, life continued, and Sara grew taller and stronger and stranger. They attended human schools but learned history from their mother. They played human games but practiced meditation. They were 2 things at once, and they saw no contradiction in this. When was 15, he came to his father with a question. Why do they fear us? Was working in his laboratory, surrounded by machines and screens. He set down his tools and gave his son his full attention. This was something loved about his father. No matter how busy he was, he always had time to listen. They do not fear you, said carefully. They fear what you represent. What do we represent? Change, smiled gently. They have lived the same way for 10,000 years. They believe their way is the only way. You and your sister prove that there are other paths. You prove that old and new can exist together. This frightens them. Thought about this. He could feel his father's emotions, a soft glow of love and hope in something else, something like satisfaction. You are not afraid of change, said. No, humans cannot afford to fear change. We live too short to stay the same. Put his hand on his son's shoulder. This is our gift to the galaxy, not our technology, not our resources. Our gift is our willingness to become something new every single day. That night, Sara finished building a communication device that could send messages faster than any technology in the galaxy. She showed it to her family at dinner, explaining the principles in words that mixed Korean, English, and she was so excited that she barely ate. Watched her children and felt something bloom in her chest. Pride, hope, love, all the feelings she had learned from over 20 years of marriage. She thought about her mother, sitting on her ancient throne, surrounded by advisors who told her only what she wanted to hear. She thought about the empire, so powerful and so blind. And she knew that the future would not be decided by queens or empires. It would be decided by 2 children who did not know they were supposed to be impossible. The plague came without warning. It started on a small colony world far from anywhere important. A few people became sick. Their skin turned gray. Their telepathic abilities faded. Within days, they died. They had not faced a serious disease in 3,000 years. Their medical technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. They assumed they could cure this new illness quickly and quietly. They were wrong. The plague spread faster than anyone expected. It jumped from world to world, carried by travelers who did not know they were infected. By the time they sealed their borders, it was too late. The disease was everywhere. Queen stood in her council chamber and listened to reports that grew worse by the hour. Millions were sick. Hundreds of thousands had died. The hospitals were overwhelmed. The doctors were helpless. We have never seen anything like this, her chief medical officer said. His voice trembled with fear. The virus attacks our telepathic centers. It destroys the very thing that makes us. Our treatments do nothing. Our vaccines fail. We are dying, my queen. We are dying and we cannot stop it. Dismissed everyone. She sat alone on her throne in the empty chamber, and for the first time in 4,000 years she felt afraid. She thought about her daughter. She thought about the she had never met. She thought about the human she had dismissed as a pet, a temporary amusement, a tool to be used. Had built an institute. He had gathered scientists from across the galaxy. He had solved problems that they considered unsolvable. Closed her eyes and swallowed her pride. Then she sent a message to Nu. Received the message in the middle of the night. She read it once, then woke. Together they read it again. The words were simple, stripped of all royal formality. We are dying, please help. Was out of bed before finished reading. He was already planning, already thinking, already becoming the man who had saved 4 worlds from famine. We need a team, he said. The best scientists from the Institute, medical specialists, researchers who understand both human and biology. The children said quietly. Stopped, he looked at his wife. They are adults now, continued. Understands physiology better than any human doctor. Sara can analyze data faster than our best computers. They were born for this. 3 days later, a ship departed Nu for the. On board were 50 scientists, 20 doctors, and 2 young people who were neither fully human nor fully. Queen met them at the landing platform. She was thinner than remembered. Her silver hair had lost its luster. Her violet eyes were rimmed with exhaustion and grief. Daughter, she said. Mother replied. They did not embrace. Too many years had passed. Too many harsh words had been spoken. But something passed between them, a recognition of shared purpose. Turned to her. She saw, tall and calm, with eyes that seemed to look through her. She saw Sara, restless and eager, already scanning the surrounding buildings with a handheld device. They look like him, said quietly, like their father. They are their own people, replied. The work began immediately. Set up a laboratory in the Royal Medical Complex. He divided his team into groups, each focusing on a different aspect of the plague. Human doctors worked alongside healers. Scientists argued in 3 languages. Machines hummed and beeped. Went to the hospitals. He walked among the sick and the dying, holding their hands, feeling their pain. The patients were surprised by this. Physical touch was rare in their culture, but warmth and compassion eased their fear. He heals their spirits, one nurse said too. Even as their bodies fail, he gives them peace. Sara locked herself in a laboratory with 100 computers and 10 million data points. She barely slept. She barely ate. She ran simulation after simulation, looking for patterns that everyone else had missed. On the 23rd day, she burst into her father's office with wild eyes and tangled hair. I found it, she said. The plague, she explained, was not a natural disease. It had been engineered long ago by a species that had conquered. It was designed to target the telepathic gene that made the unique. It had waited for thousands of years in dormant form, passed down through generations, until some unknown trigger activated it. The created this, Sara said, not the disease itself but the conditions that allowed it to exist. Their conquests planted the seeds. Their arrogance let those seeds grow. Listened to this with a face like stone. She said nothing. But I also found the cure, Sara continued. The plague targets pure biology. It ignores humans completely, and it does not know what to do with hybrids like me, and our mixed genetics confuse it. The solution was elegant and humbling. Using genetic material from the hybrid twins, Sara developed a treatment that would modify cells just enough to trick the virus. They would not become human, but they would carry a small piece of human DNA, invisible and harmless, that would protect them forever. The empire would survive, but it would never be purely again. Queen approved the treatment. She had no choice. Within months, the plague was contained. Within a year, it was defeated. They counted their dead, nearly 3 million, and tried to understand what had happened. Led the recovery efforts with the same steady determination he had shown all his life. He asked for no reward. He accepted no title. When reporters asked him why he had helped a species that had always looked down on humans, he smiled. "They are family," he said simply. "That is what families do." Watched him from her balcony that night. He walked through the palace gardens with beside him, their hands intertwined. His hair was gray now, his face lined with age. He moved slowly, carefully, like a man who knew his time was running out. But his eyes were still bright. His spirit was still unbroken. And finally understood what she had missed for 40 years. This small, mortal, fragile human was the strongest person she had ever met. Died on a quiet morning in autumn, when the leaves on new were turning gold and red. He was 92 years old. His heart, which had never stopped loving, simply stopped beating. Was beside him when it happened. She held his hand and watched his chest rise and fall one last time. She did not cry. She had known this moment would come since the day she married him. She had spent 60 years preparing for it. But nothing could prepare her for the emptiness that followed. The funeral was held in the great hall of the institute that had built. What had started as a small research center was now a sprawling complex covering half the planet. Scientists and diplomats came from across the galaxy to pay their respects. Ships from 30 different species filled the sky. Queen came. She walked through the crowds of mourners, tall and ancient, her silver robes trailing behind her. People stepped aside to let her pass. Humans and alike watched in stunned silence as the ruler of an empire approached the simple wooden coffin of a man she had once called a pet. Stood before the coffin for a long time. She looked at its peaceful face, at the hands that had built so much, at the body that had held a spirit larger than any she had known. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. No one else could hear her words. "I was wrong about all of it." She stayed for the entire ceremony. She listened to the speeches from scientists who spoke of his genius, from diplomats who spoke of his kindness, from ordinary people whose lives he had saved. She listened to describe his father's love and sorrow, describe his laughter, and describe the 60 years they had shared. When it was over, approached her daughter. "I want to understand," the queen said. "Explain it to me. How did one human change so much?" Led her mother to a garden behind the institute. It was a small, simple place, filled with flowers that had planted himself. They sat on a stone bench and spoke. "He did not try to change anything," she said. "He simply lived. He asked questions. He listened to answers. He took what he learned and tried to make things better. That is all." "That cannot be all. We have lived for thousands of years. We have accumulated more knowledge than humans can imagine. How could one man, in one short lifetime, accomplish what our entire empire could not?" Smiled. It was the same smile she had given her husband on their wedding day, full of love and something like pity. "You watched," she said. "Acted, you preserved, created. You feared change, embraced it. That is the difference, Mother. It was never about power or knowledge or time. It was about the courage to become something new every single day." Thought about this. She thought about the 300 years that followed, the longest and strangest years of her long life. The institute spread across the galaxy. Branches opened on 100 worlds. Human scientists and scholars worked together, combining ancient wisdom with young innovation. The technologies they developed transformed life for billions. Became a healer of spirits. He traveled from world to world, teaching people to understand each other across the barriers of species and language. He never married. He said that his family was the entire galaxy. Sora became an inventor whose creations changed the shape of space travel. She married 3 times, outliving all her husbands, and had children who carried human and blood to new generations. Her descendants spread across the stars. The empire changed too. The cure that Sora had developed left its mark on every who received it. They were still telepathic, still long-lived, but they carried a piece of humanity within them now, and that piece changed them in ways no one expected. They became more curious, more open, more willing to question the old ways. Young traveled to human worlds to study. Old retired to quiet planets where they could learn new things. The rigid hierarchy that had defined the empire for 10,000 years began to soften. Watched all of this. She attended weddings between humans and she celebrated births of hybrid children. She visited the institute that had built and walked through halls filled with the sound of laughter and argument and discovery. On her 4,000th birthday, she gave a speech that shocked the galaxy. "I have lived longer than most species survive," she said. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I believed that this made me wise, but wisdom is not about how much you have seen. It is about how much you have understood, and I understood nothing until a human taught me." She paused. The hall was silent. Avnu was not a conqueror. He did not come to us with weapons or armies or demands. He came with questions. He came with kindness. He came with a willingness to learn, and in doing so, he changed us more profoundly than any war ever could. Lived another 500 years after that speech. She spent those years doing something she had never done before, learning from humans. She visited their worlds. She read their books. She ate their food and watched their entertainments and talked to their children. She discovered that they were not simple creatures after all. They were complicated and contradictory and often foolish. They made the same mistakes over and over again. They hurt each other and helped each other and loved each other with an intensity that frightened her. They were alive in a way that had forgotten how to be. When finally died, she was surrounded by her descendants. Was there, still alive after all those centuries, her silver hair now streaked with white. And Sora were there, old themselves but still vibrant. And there were children and great, a family that spanned the galaxy. Looked at them all with eyes that had seen too much and finally understood too little. "I thought I was making a small sacrifice," she whispered. "I thought I was allowing something unimportant, but I opened a door that could never be closed, and through that door came everything, everything that matters." Took her mother's hand. Was it a mistake? Smiled. It was perhaps the first genuine smile of her long life. "It was the greatest mistake I ever made," she said, "and the best thing that ever happened to us." She closed her eyes. The last thing she felt was the warmth of human hands and hands together, holding her as she passed into whatever came next. The galaxy mourned Queen, but it did not stop changing. It could not stop. Had started something that would continue forever, a slow and gentle revolution that transformed everything it touched. Humans did not conquer through force. They did not dominate through power. They simply wove themselves into the fabric of the universe and made it better. And somehow, impossibly, the universe was grateful.